Hello and welcome to Outlook webinar. I learned much more in the pubs of Cambridge than in the lecture halls. This quote is attributed to Charles Darwin. We needn't go as far as Darwin, but most of us would agree that the education system in India in particular and elsewhere also is not, it needs a complete overhaul. You and I always feel that what we learned in our schools and colleges is exactly what our children are learning in their schools and colleges, and sadly, their children might learn in their schools. So so this is a discussion we have. We have two top minds in education on this platform, and the topic is innovation in education. I know it's a very vast area. It's too large and ambitious to tackle in an hour's time. But we'll focus on the projects, on the innovative ideas that these two gentlemen have brought to the field, which are extraordinary. We have with us Professor Dinesh Singh, former Vice Chancellor of Delhi University. Thank you, Dr. Singh, for joining us. And we'll be joined in a little bit a little later by Dr. Anunaya Chaubey, who is the Provost of AnantU University, India's one of India's only design universities. Professor Singh, you're one of those persons who seem to believe in what Charles Darwin said, that school students should more be actually outside the classroom, and you tried your best to sort of lessen the dependency on the blackboard.
I totally agree with that, and it isn't that Darwin was the only one who said that. So ever since I can remember, whomsoever I have admired in the realm of education and wisdom at large, almost all of them have said the same thing in their own words. Rabindranath Tagore, he also said the same thing 100 years ago, that they have confined education to the four walls of a classroom and a blackboard. And he expressed deep dismay that education was not really connected to the real world. And so many others. Mahatma Gandhi consistently said the same thing in his own way. And all of these people like Tagore, Gandhi, all of them are very well qualified to speak on education. So what is it that they really meant? I think that's important for us to understand. And Satish, I'm a mathematician. So I like to keep things very clear in terms of definitions.
Yes.
Once you have your definitions right, if you're very clear on what you have in mind, then it's very easy to proceed in a logical fashion. So in very simple terms, let me just define what is education. Once we understand that, then you will also understand why Darwin said what he said, or why Tagore said what he said. So, my definition of education is very simple. Education is a very personal thing for every individual. It is a search of the self. It's a journey within. And when you start discovering who you are, what resonates inside you, you begin to discover yourself and therefore start getting educated. And let me put it even more simply. Each one of us is born with an inner drumbeat. I call it the antardhvani of the soul. We all have a drumbeat. And if you begin to discover the drumbeat and then start marching in the real world in harmony with the drumbeat, that's when you start getting educated. And I'll give you a simple example. Look at Mahatma Gandhi. At a very young age, at about 7 years or so, he saw the play Satyavadi Raja Harishchandra. And it resonated with his inner drumbeat, which came forth and expressed itself. This business of complete adherence to the truth, no matter what the cost. That was what his drumbeat was telling him. And that day, Gandhi took a vow that he will show allegiance to the truth, no matter what happens and no matter what the cost. That's what it means to say, march in harmony with the drumbeat. And that's when you start getting educated. Gandhi really began to get educated. Then he saw from that day onwards, whenever he marched vigorously in harmony with the truth, the power of truth, which gave him insight and wisdom, and he began to understand himself better, and therefore he began to understand the world better. Now tell me, where is a blackboard in this definition? Where is a classroom in this definition?
Absolutely. But sir, so when so many great people have thought this way. I mean, and they've tried to propagate these ideas. Why is it that we've got stuck? We've got cloistered in classrooms. We've got hemmed in by teachers. We've got this method of rote learning. I mean, where do you think? We sort of deviated and got into this system that is the present system.
Well, actually, Satish, if you go back in time, India was not like this. And I am fond of this. It's one of my favorite stories from the Chandogya Upanishad, which predates the time of Jesus Christ by hundreds of years. And these are historical recordings of the lives and teachings of the great gurus. And this is a marvelous episode, and I don't know why people in education in India and even abroad do not pay attention to this. In the Chandogya Upanishad, there is this episode, historical, where to the Gurukul of Gautam Haridrumat, a 12-year-old boy comes. There's one more learning immediately. Till the age of 12, children used to be homeschooled. They really didn't attend formal schools away from home. At 12, this boy visits Haridrumat and seeks admission to his Gurukul. And Haridrumat tells him, we admit only Brahmins. What is your lineage, child? And then this boy says, I asked this question of my mother before I set forth for your Gurukul. And my mother said that she had worked as a maid in many homes and many men could have taken advantage of her. She has no idea who my father is. But she told me to tell you this, that proclaim yourself proudly, you are Satyakam, son of Jabala the maid, and you seek admission. And Haridrumat tells him, that child, I admit you, because the only hallmark of a Brahmin is adherence to the truth. There is nothing like birth by Brahmin by birth. And he admits it. Look how the story starts. And this is a historical episode. And then what happens? Haridrumat does not tell Satyakam to go recite the Vedas. He gives him 100-odd head of cattle, tells him go to the forest and do not return until they multiply threefold. Did you know, and I'm sure you do, that in those days wealth was measured in terms of head of cattle? How many head of cattle a kingdom owned or an individual owned? This was a practical exercise in wealth management. If you see, this is all about the real world. Make sure you learn how they multiply. Make sure you learn everything that goes into the business of keeping them safe. The boy Satyakam goes off into the forest and he returns only when they multiplied so many fold.
Professor Chaubey, now I wanted to get to speak to you about this aspect of design. It is such a fundamental thing. Design is anything that you see, that you touch, that you smell, a book, a chair, a car. There is so much design in our lives. Why is it that it is not taught like mathematics or biology or history or literature? At a younger stage, at school level, when it is such an all-pervasive kind of a thing that nobody can do without.
Well, design in our culture, and we all know it since we have grown up in this culture. So design has been quite an underrated skill, and many a parent, would not want their children to imagine, and imagination is at the core of design thinking. Empathy is at the core of design thinking, and quite often, initially in its roots, design would emerge as imagination at play in art through paintings or drawings or music that kids would be so keen on. But in our milieu, in our culture, in our society, imagination is not something, which is often encouraged. So what is encouraged is total focus, total concentration on developing skills that are linear, that are numerical, that would help you get good grades, and through good grades you'd get a good job. And since all our focus, while growing up is on getting good traits. Imagination is something that is thrown out of the window. And imagination, as I said, is at the core of design.
Yeah, in fact, I mean, coming from a culture like ours, which is, with such great architecture, with such great craft products, which are actually essentially designed. I mean, like how you weave a carpet, how you sculpt, a stone. I mean, it's really painful, actually, for you to hear from you that in our culture, I mean, we've just lost this whole learning of design, which we were, I think, I mean, as a culture, I think second to none.
So there are people, so there are great people who have practiced design, in the most unimaginable ways. And but the problem is that in among common people, lay people, the notion of design is limited only to, say, fashion design and art and craft or something of that sort. I would like to say here that I think so great thinkers have been great designers. Gandhi has been a great designer. So thinking is also a design. Thinking is also a product. A thought, a philosophy, an idea is also a product, so which is being put on ground to make impact. Karl Marx, if you look at design thinking and its process, it starts with empathy, the ability to empathize. And empathy comes with curiosity. How curious are you? When you look around you, do you ask questions? Who's that person? Why is he like this? Can I help him? Can I come up with something that will solve his problem or her problem? What is it that I create? And hypothesis, and then you ideate, you re-ideate, and so on, till you come up with a prototype. Now, it's the same thing with an idea. Communism, for instance, that idea, which sought equality, through a common ownership of property. Now, that is the prototype, but it's preceded by empathy. It's preceded by defining what the problem is, understanding what the problem is, then coming up with, say, ideations, or one product, second product, you go on refining it till you come up with an idea. Gandhi's non-violence is also an idea. Religions, so the core of it, so these are design products.
Yeah.
So we have never actually looked at design.
I remember, reading somewhere that, a master carpet maker, for instance, if a novice, if a student sort of made a mistake in the pattern, it is not really a mistake. He would try and make him build around it and take it to some other, way, which is, there are no mistakes really in that sense. So as you're saying, it's like it's ideas, how they spring.
No, there could be mistakes, and that's why, you would want to refine it, improve on those blemishes, so till you come to a stage where you have a product which is flawless. Right? So look at a product like a car, an automobile, so you would want to keep improving it to the point where it, say, it consumes as little fuel as possible.
So are these learnings, in your tenure at the Delhi University, for instance, you introduced this the Cluster Innovation Center, which is basically, I think, taking the faculty away from the colleges to the village and the slum clusters. So, I mean, are these learnings or the tips that you picked up from our mythologies? I mean, is this what was at the back of your mind when you started something? Would you like to tell us a little bit about the Cluster Innovation Center?
Yeah, sure. Look, Satish, I mean, I don't claim to be a wise man. All I have done is try to understand the great people of the past. So, no credit to me. But it certainly helps when you pay attention to the great ones. And I have consistently, in howsoever modest a way, tried to understand what Gandhiji said about education. Repeatedly, he said, in the realm of education, what you do with your hands will enter your heart. Consistently. And no one was more qualified than Gandhiji to speak on education. And I'll tell you why. In South Africa, he first set up a school and ran it personally. Then when he came to India, he set up a university, Gujarat Vidyapeeth, which functions still today in Ahmedabad. Then when he went to Wardha, he set up a polytechnic for women. On the governing body of that polytechnic, he put India's foremost scientists, Bose, Raman, and so many others. So he was very well qualified to speak on education. What was his learning? What was his wisdom? Make it practical, make it hands-on, make it connected to the real world. That's what the Innovation Center was all about. We were looking to seek and drive innovation. So it's a two-way process in village clusters, slum clusters, industrial clusters, and education clusters. And that more or less covers the whole world. So we treated the world as a classroom. And our learning was project-based, transdisciplinary, hands-on, connected to the needs and challenges of the world. And that is why we reaped such good dividends.
So I wanted to know, since our education system is so sort of syllabus oriented, and there are so when you go to a cluster, it's there may be a whole lot of students or people who want to learn with varying degrees of background education. Some may be absolutely raw. So how did that work? Your team, the kind of what did they do to impart what they wanted to them, who probably has never heard of geometry or calculus.
Sure, certainly. There will always be that. So there are many ways which we combine to handle such issues. So number one, when these students come in, we first acquaint them with certain core learnings. So they deal with communication, data, and IT. Essentially, we build core learnings around that. So we would teach them, for instance, when we talk about data, it's so transdisciplinary, so hands-on, that it brings in literature also. So this opens their horizons. And I'll give you a quick example in the business of data. It's very important for all students, no matter what realm of human endeavor they're connected with, to understand the basics of data, how to analyze, how to infer, how to collect, so on and so forth. It's very useful. So we started by telling them to read this story of Conan Doyle's about Sherlock Holmes' adventure of the dancing man. And all that story is about how Sherlock Holmes decodes an encrypted message. And that's all about data. They start with looking at the frequency of utterance of letters of the English alphabet. And you will be surprised how far they can take this journey in so many ways. So that's hands-on. They would do this on the spot. Download any 1,000-word passage of the English language, look for which letters occur with what frequency, and so many insights begin to develop straight away. And they also begin to grasp communication and language.
It was not only the clusters and the villages in the city, but it was actually a college on wheels, right? It was a full train of a college, and it would go places.
Yeah. So we used to rent a whole train from the Indian Railways. It cost us some money. The university would pay them some money. Convert the train into a college on wheels. So we would have one big room. One coach would be converted into a kind of seminar room or a classroom. Every student had a laptop. The train was equipped with Wi-Fi. And students were selected on the basis of, we would announce a journey. So the first journey was from here to Ahmedabad, to Bombay, to Goa, to Bangalore, then to Wardha, and then back. Once we announced the journey, we asked them to submit projects in groups on what they would do, and the projects are completely open. So they could talk about anything. Some came forward trying to see how they could redesign the toilets of the train. Some wanted to see how they could make the train more energy efficient. Others wanted to look at the culture of the lands that they were going to pass through. Some wanted to talk about the industry or the economy of the area. So it's very open. We select them on that basis, and right through the journey, they work and grow on these projects. It's not a question of coming up with a definitive result through a project. The idea is to get more and more acquainted. And you will be surprised. Many things happen. 1,000 students would ride on each journey. We had 5 journeys in my 5 years as a Vice Chancellor. When the students would return, they would be completely transformed. They would have discovered much from within themselves through these external journeys. That's what I call being educated. And one more side benefit, almost all of them would become poets. The train was called the Gyanodaya Express. the Dawn of Knowledge Express, College on Wheels. And we really enjoyed those things. They were very beneficial.
In India, one has seen that, as long as, there is a certain person, who's got these ideas, in an institution, things work. But somehow, the person leaves, retires, and then, the project just falls through. Do you sometimes feel sad or sort of, a little sort of beaten that, something like this has not taken off? I mean, in a sense, all universities should try this, all faculty, it's such a great idea. I mean, it's...
Well, Satish, it had begun to catch on. It's just not just about the Gyanodaya Express. Some of the things that we have launched at the University of Delhi had begun to catch on across India, and not just India, in many other parts of the world. I had people from some of the best universities abroad come and sign agreements with us, and students from abroad had begun to come and enroll in our programs. So it was catching on. It's just that I ran into some kind of opposition at the higher levels for reasons that I have still not understood. I still don't know what happened and why. I was so happy, and we were so happy just living in our own world, doing the things that we thought made us happy and made a difference to the students.
In fact, I wanted to, since we are talking about innovations in education, that's the topic that we're discussing. And, in design, the DNA of design is actually innovation, right? It's like, it's just you. So in your university, sir, what is how do you, what kind of innovations have you brought in? I know it's very, it's very early, it's a very young university, it's a very vibrant university. What sort of innovations are you trying out?
Well, I think, the first thing is, like I said, design thinking, empathize. You need to look around you and identify a problem. So what we usually see is that in the workforce, there are perhaps not enough people, who would think comprehensively or who would have the big picture. We have lots of specialists. We have lots of people who are very good when it comes to doing one particular thing, performing one function, but the big picture is missing. And this was a problem that we identified. How do we create a workforce? How do we create the next generation of leaders who would be specialists, but would also have a very good understanding of the context in which they would be operating or using their specialization? So you could be a computer engineer or computer scientist, so you could be creating apps and all kinds of softwares. But if you didn't know what the world needs, if you didn't understand how the society operates, if you didn't know about literacy rate, if you didn't know what problem education sector faces, if you didn't know how our environment could actually be saved or helped using your device. So if you didn't know about any of these things, then you only end up becoming a tool in some other agency's setup. You're only a cog in someone else's machine. So in order to become a leader, you need to get this big picture. And this will only happen when you look at the world from windows or lenses of different sciences or subject domains, knowledge domains. You need to know sociology, economics, philosophy, history, political science, all these compulsions that determine your world. Once you know it, then you're free to practice your law, you're free to practice, your science, your business, whatever, medicine, technology, whatever it is that you have become a specialist at, you would be able to drive it in once you know the map, of this world. So that is the innovation that we have introduced at Anant National University, at Anant Fellowship in particular. And a lot of design thinking, connecting education with a result, with an impact that a student would be required to make. At the end of the day, design thinking is about coming up with a prototype, with a solution. And Anant National University is about solution. We create solutionaries, students who use education and experience to observe problems, seek solution, and to come up with a prototype which improves your world. So we have a fellowship, and I think we have shared some information about the fellowship, which actually brings into focus how exactly design thinking and innovation, has been used to create a curriculum.
Yeah, it's interesting that in your team you have a philosopher, a feminist publisher. I mean, it's like varied people, as you are saying, to bring in this holistic sort of approach, which itself is it's an innovative idea.
Right. So we have grown up following or studying a discipline where in my classroom, so everyone would have the same focus, everyone speaks the same language, everyone has the same dream, everyone is looking at the same set of recruiters. So we have grown up, we grew up, quite boxed and rigid in our thinking. We could not understand someone else's language, who came from some other discipline. So this was a big obstacle in developing a comprehensive worldview. And it's for this reason that in the fellowship, Anant Fellowship that we have, which is dedicated to built environment, the world that human beings have created, full of noise, full of hoardings that block your view of the sky, congestion, pollution. How can the fellows, how can these students interested in built environment, coming from any background, how can they make an impact? And in order for this to happen, they need to understand the compulsions, that have created this world, right? Who compulsions or factors that inhabit this world. So gender is one such thing, say role of women, so a contribution of women in making the built environment around you, economy, the livelihood, our political setup that governs a city, a built environment. So there are so many perspectives, so that you need to acquire. And it's for this reason that we offer courses that come from different domains, delivered by the best, teacher. He could be a great faculty, he could be a great practitioner, but this is the kind of exposure that is needed, and that is the innovation. Not limit a student, not limit his potential or her potential. Give it an opportunity to really blossom and enable it to understand how diverse our world is. When you develop such a vision, you are better placed to observe the problem and to solve it.
That is another important aspect. Whenever we talk innovation in education, whenever somebody comes up with a sort of an out-of-the-box idea, the opposition to it, from every quarter, from the faculty, from the students, from the parents, from the state, it's so enormous that, why is it that, it's best that they would want to hold on to their little fiefdoms and stay and let things be as they are? And is that the reason? Why aren't people open? I would say, especially the faculty, in many ways, why aren't they open to ideas like this?
Satish, so if you will pardon me for a personal reference, 30 years ago, my father was also a vice chancellor, and to my mind, one of the really great vice chancellors India has had. Almost, and forgive me for this personal reference, but there's the reason why I'm getting this. Every single, in those days, there was no internet or there were no TV channels, but every single newspaper in this country, from the South Hindu to the Tribune in the North, and all the ones in Delhi, have praised in their editorials my father by name for the great work he did. And he told me that when he was trying to reform the university, he said, I had no trouble handling the parents, students, teachers, or Karamcharis. But he said, when my government didn't want what I was doing, he said, I gave up. There's nothing you can do against a government. I have often found this. I had really no trouble handling my teachers. There was always some opposition, but you will be surprised at such large numbers had embraced it. I had no trouble at all with my students. I called the student union leaders of every one of my 80-odd colleges and explained the whole program to them. This was, of course, going to be launched after they would have graduated. Not only did they give unanimous approval, they said, can you somehow make sure that it can be implemented while we are still in college? So you can see how they were embracing. It was the government of the day that went after me or my programs, not really me as such, but my program. And that's when you throw up your hands. You can't handle these things at that level. It's very tough. I fought. I stood my ground. It got very difficult.
Yes, I remember those days, the controversies, and I can only imagine what you and your team must have gone through at that time. Here there is such a good thing happening. It's for everybody to see. And then I think Delhi University sort of went back to what it was.
Yeah. So, when I had taken over as Vice Chancellor, why did I go in for these reforms? In the beginning of my term, I did two things. I invited one of India's top multinational firms in finance to come and offer jobs to my students from Bombay. They flew in a whole team, and they weren't looking for any experts in finance or management or anything. All they said was they wanted anyone who had an undergraduate degree in anything, but they must know a little bit about how to handle data. Simple, just simple, and some communication skills. And I advertised why they were offering around 30,000 rupees, and in those days, it's a fair amount for anyone who has a degree from any college. And lots of people applied. At least we had huge numbers that came in. We sorted 1,200 of the best, and then the team flew in, and we didn't let them know which college the kids were from or what was their social background.
Okay.
They interviewed each one of them, and guess we had shortlisted 1,200 of the best. They could select only 3, and they told me they will never come back again. This is all on record, Satish. Now you can understand what we are doing with these kids. We offer them nothing. Mechanical learning by rote or meaningless disciplines. Do you know how many students study Sanskrit in my university? About 5,000. Are we really going to have 5,000 Paninis? And do they study Sanskrit in a meaningful way? No. I asked Sanskrit, more than 2,000 of them, that why do you study Sanskrit? They said, we love it. This is great. You should. And I said, but do you also desire to study something in addition? 1/3 said they also want to study math. 1/3 told me computer science. 1/3 said political science. And do you know that Chomsky's work in linguistics comes from his deep understanding of Panini's grammar and his mathematics, and he merges the two, build this thing in linguistics. None of my Sanskrit students is ever given a chance to acquaint himself with computer science or mathematics. Guess how many Paninis we're losing? And we do that in mathematics. We have 5,000-6,000 students in maths at Delhi University. All of them learn a subject called fluid dynamics. It's taught on the board. I have done this so many times. I've talked to students in fluid dynamics courses. I walked in and said, do you like doing anything in fluid dynamics? Any project? No, we don't like it. Then I asked, okay, would you like to build a fighter jet with me? All their hands go up. What they don't know is that fluid dynamics is used for fighter jets. We just don't think the real world. That is the tragedy, sir.
I would agree with Professor Singh there. And the simple explanation for this is, a large chunk of our workforce gets comfortable with a situation which hasn't changed in a long time. And it's too much to ask of them, to change the situation, right? Because it requires a recalibration. It requires, reorganizing oneself. It requires, for one to come out of the comfort zone, start studying new subjects. It requires hard work. And it's for this reason that you will not really find too many leaders, and you would find perhaps, many followers, but leaders are very few. Leaders are ones who are willing to come out of their comfort zone. They're willing to try out new things. Their antenna are very strong. They know how the world is changing, and they know what the world needs. This world, so the changing world. If your eye power is changing, right, you would ask for, a different pair of glasses so that you can see the world better. But there are some people who are lazy, too lazy to actually go and get that done. And that's the reason why there'll be a lot of, kind of pushback. But the good thing is that a good thing often finds its way, and determines the future. So liberal arts, for instance, so why would you want to, somebody studying physics to also study philosophy and music and poetry?
Yeah.
And that is how the world is running. Say the Large Hadron Collider, say Geneva, Switzerland. The cutting edge, physics lab trying to confirm the existence of the boson, right? They would invite artists. They have a residency, program just for artists who come there and work with physicists. Why do they do that? Because the artists, or anybody, they would be thinking differently. They would come up with questions that could inspire a new path, a new approach. And that is something that we are not willing to allow. And that is something that must happen.
The other thing, Professor Dinesh Singh was just talking about, this coronavirus pandemic, it seems to have thrown up its own sort of innovative ways of both teaching and learning. Do you think there are takeaways from here? I mean, some opportunities in the crisis which we can take forward, like e-classes and so many things that are happening because you can't meet personally.
Satish, I think, said this, the world is going to change. And the world is going to change, said dramatically. And you see, so the corona thing kind of exploded on us. We didn't have any warning. We didn't have time to acclimatize. It was from one day to the other, so I remember the university shut down, and within 3 or 4 days, we had to, announce online classes. So the only experience with online classes that we had, or online commerce that we had, was through Skype or Google Hangout and any such thing. But we were quick to use whatever resources that were available, to cater to students. But what is emerging now is that it is a viable way of, teaching, learning, doing research. So you can connect with the whole world. You don't really have to travel. You don't really have to get, big time faculty to travel all the way, come here. It saves costs.
Yeah, in fact, in some ways, this teacher to student ratio, this sort of renders it meaningless.
Yeah,
I mean, one person can teach so many people in so many villages. It does open out a whole lot of opportunities that way.
It does. So there are opportunities indeed, but at this stage in our use of it, I think there are issues as well, so the bandwidth, and whatever it is. But these are things that will
ironed out. Yeah.
But what's going to happen? It's not just, the education space, businesses. I think what people realize now is that I don't really have to spend big money in renting property, to have my have my office there, so Nariman Point or wherever it is. I could just be operating, so my workers could be operating from home. I don't need that space. So real estate, people, I think it's much is going to change. In universities and colleges, I think, so there would just be a certain number of days where human contact is allowed, or will be allowed, or will be required. Yeah, so it's a world that is changing. I think the marketplace will change. How human beings interact with each other, that's going to change. Whether you would be shaking hands with people or giving them a hug, I wonder, how much of this suspicion residue we are going to carry even when the lockdown is lifted. To what extent will this lockdown be lifted? Will the lockdown always stay with us, inside of us? So we would lock ourselves up, to other people perhaps. Who knows how it's going to turn out? Would you really, very happily travel in the metro? Would you not be suspicious of the guy sitting next to you in a flight, in an aeroplane?
Yeah. Social. This is I guess a very, very fundamentally, it throws up innovations in a very basic way in that sense. I also wanted to ask you, since we're talking innovation in education, the current pandemic, this coronavirus pandemic, has thrown up its own, or rather has forced us to actually be more innovative in our education, in teaching. There are e-classes, there are various things going on. Do you think, there is something for us to learn from this, and some of it can be taken forward even once the crisis blows over?
Oh, there is so much, Satish. There is so much. Suppose you had no access to anything. All I had was this basic laptop, suppose, and the internet. You can still do so much. You know the study case of the Diamond Princess where that virus broke out and it was a confined ship with 3,000 odd passengers. You know, there is so much to learn just through that case study. Michael Levitt, the Nobel laureate, has consistently said that this virus limits itself. You know, it does not go beyond the point no matter what you do. Of course, if you do nothing, it will cause more damage, but at one stage it will cease. Now I find that if you look at the data, that's exactly what is happening. The point is, you could study all this data because it is freely available on the web, through the internet, and a simple device, even your cell phone. I'll give you an example. I looked at the data of all the countries before the virus began to hit India with some vehemence. I looked at all the data of the major countries that were being hit, and I could see clear patterns. There's nothing new that I discovered, but I did it for myself. And I predicted that India will be far better off when it comes to this virus than most of the other countries. It's all there on record. And I'm not a scientist. I'm an ordinary man sitting with a laptop. What caused dismay to me is none of my colleagues is doing this. Their students should be engaging with this. That's not happening.
In fact, sir, what you were trying to do with this Cluster Innovation Center and the Gyanodaya Express, which is basically to take education to the poorer section, to the rural areas. This e-learning, for instance, has democratized. It seems the whole thing. I mean, all you need, as you said, is really a computer screen, a little internet, and electricity. I mean, and any the topmost mind in education can reach that small. Kasbah, a small village, anywhere in the country. Do you think it's a practical way to, go ahead with this?
I'm telling you, Satish, this is no disrespect to anyone. But if you have a good internet connection, a reasonable connection, and some device, even a smartphone or a laptop or a desktop, you can educate yourself to a great extent. I have given courses on unleashing the power of the web as a knowledge device. And I gave a webinar just a few days ago when thousands came online to listen to me. I spoke for about half an hour on how the web itself can be treated as a great guru. The tragedy is that we are not harnessing the power of the web. India has a huge deficit of teachers. Good teachers are even less. India has, but on the other hand, our penetration of internet through data-based cell phones is pretty good. Somewhere in India, you should use this opportunity to harness the web. And, I've done this. I've demonstrated this time and again. I'll take just 2 more minutes, Satish. You've been very patient with me. Just a few days ago, or 5 months ago, I picked 2 undergraduates from Delhi University who are from a very, very modest socio-economic background. They never had a laptop in their lives. They didn't know what Excel was. They didn't know what data was. They were engaged in learning courses like Hindi and so forth. I gave them a short introduction to what data means, one-on-one, for about 30 minutes. I got them laptops. I got them access to the internet, explained to them Excel. I'm not a great master at Excel myself, so you can imagine what I could have done. But I sort of showed them some things. What I did was I opened up the web to them where you get Excel tutorials, you get YouTube lessons, and I said, here's my problem to you. Today I'm giving you this problem. Learn how to solve it by looking at things on the web. Come back to me in 3 days. Do you know they had started from scratch, they had no data background, they had no IT background. In 4 months, they had advanced to such a level, and all by themselves, where they could do probability experiments with simulation on Excel. Wow. That's the power of the web. And we need to somehow harness this. That is, to my mind, one of the best ways to take care of India's young.
Just one last question, sir. Since you've had such a long career in education and you're a mathematician yourself, theoretical classes, I think, can happen like this. Like history and literature and, various. But what about the laboratories where you need labs, where you need, a physical, how would you solve that?
Certainly. I totally agree with you. So I have never said that this does not require any face-to-face or in-person or infrastructure. We have to somehow judiciously combine these things.
Yeah.
There are so many ways in which, this city is dotted with all kinds of labs, hospitals, this, that. Universities don't connect with them. They are all learning places. We have to synergize and connect. That is what we had begun to do at the Innovation Center. We were treating everything as a sort of adjunct to an education facility. Treat the whole world as a university and you will never suffer.
Sure, sir. Thank you very much, Professor Dinesh Singh. It was a pleasure talking to you, and very, very good, many ideas. I mean, I'm sure many of the youngsters, the faculty members, teachers who are listening to this, would take some of these up. And as you said, probably, this pandemic, this crisis has, it's also given us a lot of opportunities. Actually, it has shown us various ways to go around teaching in, in unique ways, as you've just explained. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Dinesh, for joining.
My pleasure. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Chaubey. It is a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much for joining Outlook webinar. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Satish. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you so much.
Thank you.